You hold degrees from Morehouse College and from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. You're a member of the board of the Prince George's County School Board. You founded the Male Educator Network for Prince George's County. You're pushing this Real Men Teach campaign. Where did this passion for education come from? What does it mean?
Well, if you asked me that 2 years ago, I would say it came from my mother. She's the first person I ever heard use the term child care advocate. I didn't know what an advocate was at the time, but she spent the greater part of her adult life advocating for early childhood development in New Jersey, in my community of New Brunswick in the central Jersey area, but also in the capital, Trenton. But after having met you and getting more involved in this campaign, I think it goes back hundreds of years to family members of mine who share the same blood, who have been fighting for education in this country even before the country was even founded. And so I think, I tell people, I didn't choose education, education chose me.
I remember you saying that. Well, let's get back to that story. You and I met right here 2 years ago, just 2 years ago?
2 years ago on the Martin Luther King holiday. So
Right. So can you tell us about what happened then?
Well, I say this and without any exaggeration, that day should never have happened. I was asked to come and speak on behalf of the Board of Education to bring greetings. I was not scheduled to do so. I was standing in for a colleague who said she could not make it. And so, being a good colleague, I arrived here, and she was here after all, surprising to me. But through that experience, particularly hearing your story, hearing the story of your son, that really brought me to this place and to my connection with you. But in many ways, it was me answering a call for a colleague who, in many ways, set me on this path, but in many ways it should never have happened.
And were you familiar with the story of the Rosenwald schools before that presentation?
I was not, at least not in the term Rosenwald. I would subsequently find out that my family was connected to it, and that there were Rosenwald schools that I had seen had been a part of my family for nearly 100 years. But the name Rosenwald was not something I was familiar with prior to the day meeting you and hearing about the story, about this school, about your book, and about the history of Julius Rosenwald, Booker T. Washington, and education in America.
So Curtis, tell me about the picture of the school that you had on your office wall and how that led you on a search.
Well, I'll say, I'm like a lot of people, try to create a space around me that's motivating, inspiring, but also speaks to who I am, and so those who come into my space understand who I am. And so as I was hired to help lead a national project on education, I wanted to surround my office space with pictures of the history of education in America. And did an extensive search online, and tried to find photographs that really spoke to the longevity of the struggle for education for Black people in America. Couldn't find one. And then just so happened I was in Virginia, where my family is originally from, the Valentine and Chavis families, and was with a cousin. And I asked him sort of, in a sort of flippant way, hey, Uncle Willie, are there any schools around here? I want to get a photograph of one and put one on my wall, 'cause I can't find one on the internet. He said, Curtis, what do you mean? The school's right there. And I said, right where? He's right next to the church. And I said, well, no, there's no school next to a church. There's just a couple old, storage facilities. He says, Curtis, that is the school where your grandfather learned where to read, and where I learned to read, and our family, and where his father, my great uncle, created a bus company, the school bus that he drove, and the resources from that bus company went off to, send 7 of them to college. And so I was set off on a journey of sort of wanting to decorate my space and create a space around me, to creating an entire world around me, around public education, and my connection to Julius Rosenwald and the Carroll-Boyd School of Bracy, Virginia.
So you had no idea that old building that you were familiar with from childhood was a school?
I wouldn't even call it a building now. It is an edifice in all sorts of the word, and I don't want it to be an edifice any longer. Obviously, we'll talk about that. But no, I think subsequently I've seen photographs of it in its heyday, and it has taken on a life of its own in my mind, in my heart, in my family, in my immediate family, because I've gone off to share with my cousins, and there are a lot of us, my great-grandfather Beverly Valentine and Martha Valentine, who helped create the school, had 11 children, and their children had, a number of children. And so I have a number of cousins who all have direct connections. Many of us who are in education and social justice can draw back our history to this place and this time in history.
And I assume those 10 children went to the school.
Yes, they all attended the school. The school was founded actually in 1926, and so some of the younger ones attended, actually, just be honest. But all of their children who lived in that community lived there. Prior to the creation of the school, community members attended school in a church, but even the church required that only members of the church could attend the school. So there was a sense of conditionality around who could attend the school. But the Rosenwald School, for the first time in the community,
was a public school.
Was a public school, inclusive of the entire community, and was again run by the community, built with the hands of the community. The teachers who were in the school were part of another program, and so it was, in every sense of the word, the power of Black determination to be educated in a physical form.
That's such a thrilling part of the Rosenwald School story, that it wasn't a rich man plunking money down and saying, "Here's a school for you." It was a rich man saying, "I'll work with you."
Yeah, I mean, I think, of the nearly 5,000 communities that are impacted by Julius Rosenwald, in many ways there had to have been an enabling environment when people arrived in that community to say, there are resources available to you if you're able to also come up with the other 2/3 from the community and from local government. I imagine there were communities that were not ready. I don't know.
Oh, there were.
But I imagine there were communities that the environment was not ready, and that there could have been 10,000 or 15,000.
Right.
But I give all the credit to obviously Julius Rosenwald, but also the communities that were ready with the resources in kind and the more tangible, and again this sense of education being the silver bullet. And in my family, it was, in every sense of the word, the silver bullet.
So tell me about the Rosenwald Park campaign and your connection to it.
Well, the park campaign is something that I've thrown my heart into because of what it represents. It is for us historic in so many ways. And one, will be the first park dedicated to a Jewish American, which when I first heard that seemed like
it's astonishing,
a typo, a misprint, but also an opportunity for us to highlight the connections between the communities. I think it's incredibly important, the African American and the Jewish community, but also the history of education. And this campaign, which has inspired, I think, me to that there is anything possible in the country, where I think prior to that, finding anything that both parties could agree on didn't seem likely. And so having a bipartisan, campaign, folks from every faith community being a part of this, the national reach, representatives from the South, Midwest, Northeast, coming together saying, we have to tell this story. And so having become part of this campaign, being a part of a board of individuals who are so diverse and come to this with their own sense of connection to Rosenwald. I'm one of the few members of the board who has a direct connection to a family member of a founder, but there are others who come to it from their own connection to African American history, the Jewish community, familial connections like yourself and others, that I think Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington would be really proud of it.
I think they would too, and I think it's, I feel like now is an exciting time, and we're ready for this to happen.
Yeah. Ironically, I would say, from what I hear from from your reading, I think Rosenwald would probably have said, "Please, I don't need that. I don't need all the attention." I think there are opportunities for him to put names on things, and he said, "Please don't."
Well,
and so,
it's interesting. Some members of the family have made that argument, to which I reply, "This isn't about so much celebrating him as it is celebrating the spirit of what he did and the accomplishments that he had. And it's not about building him up so much as it is celebrating a really unique and unusual story."
I mean, in my mind, I think about if I had opportunity to sit down with him, if he was someone who would have come to us and said, "Please don't do this," and say, "Well, Curtis, you try to convince them." In a sentence, I would say, "No, it's so much bigger than you, and it's so much bigger than a name. It is an ideal around this country and what's possible." Him being obviously a descendant of immigrants as well, and in this country, symbols matter, both positive and negative. And there are conversations now around Confederate monuments and what they mean to those who want to keep them up. And so at the same time, we have to have physical representations of what's possible for all of us as Americans, but also the reflection on history. There's so much history that goes untold, and I know you kind of rattle off my things I've done. I've done those things because I was told earlier that I had family, I had people around me who supported me, but that these things were possible because there are others in my family who had done it, or others who looked like me. There are people who don't accomplish nearly as much as they could because of disbelief. And I think symbols like this, representation and recognitions like this are bigger than any individual, and will have impacts much further along than any of the 5,000 schools and all the students, everyone he touches. This is going to touch millions and millions of lives.
That's wonderful. Thank you.